A while back, Chris at CD Scale Models asked how modelers got into the hobby. And more recently, Brian at Got Fuels Model Car Garage asked for how modelers set up their modeling spaces and related tips. For me, the topics actually merge together nicely, so I'm going to kind of address both together. This is my modeling story, and I'm going to start with a short clip I recently made. I'm still looking for a picture of my 1973 Monte Carlo. My mom made these boxes for my brother and I. So I'm going through these scrapbooks, and I remember my mom making us make these scrapbooks. And so here's the map of the state of Illinois, some articles in here. We went to the circus. That's the program from the circus. Bears stuff. This is Ed Obradovich. There's these articles about the first supersonic crossing of the Atlantic. And then, lo and behold, the cover sheet from the instructions, I remember building this Zero and a British Spitfire. And these are the box art. And then I built, and I remember building that, the Ardo A234B, a P-38 Lightning. Oh, and then the landing on the moon. But I looked through here, and it doesn't have, I also remember building a 1967 GTO because I remember those taillights. And I built the creature from the Black Lagoon and a bunch of other models. But I thought that was, funny and that I'd share it. Like many other models, I started when I was maybe 8. And like I said in that video, I actually built a wide variety of kits, not just planes, although those were my favorite. Aside from the ones I mentioned, I remember building Grandpa Munster's coffin car. And my brother, who's a couple of years older than me, built a B-17 and a few others. But as I got into my teens, my interests turned to sports. I played basketball, real cars, and my first real jobs and, life. But I remained a history buff and a tinkerer. So flash forward about a dozen years in the early 90s, and I'm in my first post-college job in Chicago, and I'm sharing a 2-bedroom condo with a roommate, the guy who to this day is my very best friend, Jim. He's a military history buff, as am I, but he's way more knowledgeable. When Desert Storm happened, we'd intently watch the coverage, and it kind of happened organically, and how guys are naturally competitive. When a piece of military hardware would come up on the screen, for instance, Jim would say, "That's a M113A2 main battle tank there, John." And, a few minutes later, I'd try to one-up him. "That's an A10 Warthog tank killer there, Jim. And did you know it fires depleted uranium rounds?" And, of course, he'd come back and one-up me and say, "Oh, you mean the ones it fires from its 20-millimeter Gatling cannon embedded in the nose?" So when we parted as roommates, I moved into a 1-bedroom, 2-floor loft apartment. And I naturally made trips to the local Ace Hardware to get stuff that I needed for the apartment. And I think I've mentioned before that most Ace Hardwares have a hobby aisle. Well, this is when I learned that. So I'm walking through the store when out of the corner of my eye, I catch a glimpse of what I think are models on a shelf. And I stop and I go back, and sure enough, I simultaneously flash back to the hobby shops of my youth and simultaneously flash on that Desert Storm thing that Jim and I did. And I proceeded to build all the models you see here and a few others at the kitchen table of my loft apartment. And I remember I would spray can paint them in the parking lot, and I had a blast. But as you can see, they were pretty bad, like horrible seams, silvering decals, sloppy canopies, but I didn't know any better. To me, they looked great, and I actually hung them in my apartment. So then I took another break in the mid-90s. I got married. We went to grad school at night to get our MBAs. We gutted and rehabbed the first property that we bought. So we didn't have a whole lot of time or space for modeling. But a few years after that, now in the late 90s, I'm now working for R.R. Donnelley, the printing company. And, they print books, magazines, newspaper inserts, you name it. And I was an IT project manager replacing IT systems across the whole company. And they had about 80 printing plants across the country. And I managed like 5 or 6 of those. When a team from corporate visits a plant, the plant manager gives the team a tour of the plant. I think we were in Tennessee. We're on the tour and we come up to the saddle stapler. For those of you who don't know, basically, a magazine is a bunch of leaves and then they're stapled together in the middle. So what the saddle stapler does is, there's a saddle, so to speak, that rides along this rail. And as it goes along, a new leaf falls on it as it goes. And then at the end, it stops and it kind of gathers it up, and then ka-chung, a big saddle stapler comes down and shoots 3 staples through it. And then they turn and they gather up, and then they either get boxed or there's a quality control person who's thumbing through them. And if they find a mistake, boom, they hit the big red button, the whole line stops, and then they go back and they find where the mistake began, and then they grab them all, the bad ones, and they throw them into a recycle bin. And just as I'm coming up to that bin, she throws them in, right? And they spread out like a deck of cards. And I see this back page. And I kind of do a double take. And I'm like, is that a model helicopter? Because I had never heard of MRC before. And I turn it over and I'm like, no way. And I start looking through it and I'm like, no frigging way. This is a magazine dedicated to building models really well. Again, this is 96. It's pre-internet. Of course they have magazines, but it never dawned on me. Obviously, Donnelly had very strict rules about taking anything out of a plant, but I did grab a subscription card out of it and literally filled it out and mailed it in the lobby of the hotel that night. And because I did early enough, this was actually that issue that was in that bin, and the first one I received. So I just stopped modeling right then and there. And I subscribed to the magazine and I started learning about how to actually do things correctly. At this time, we were also planning on moving into this house. So as we were building the house, I kind of educated myself on the proper way to model and what it's going to take to do that so that I could purpose build this room. The video kind of now turns to Brian's question of how did you set up your workspace and tips and things, but also a history of my modeling. So this room, which is in my basement, serves as both my workshop, my household workshop, the pegboard and all the tools and everything. The rest of it serves for my model building and displaying. So as I was building my house and planning this room, I ordered a laundry tub to be put in down here, knowing that I would like to have a sink in this room. And this was the most convenient spot in the basement for them to put the sink because it was close to all the other plumbing. So I picked this corner of the basement to build my workshop. Given the pre-existing infrastructure that was already here, I started to plan out how I wanted to do this. So my water on and off is in there, if you can see it, and you can see there's an elbow that goes over to here. There's also the big drain pipe that actually collects all the waste from the house and goes out of the house there. So what I did is just built this corner out, and that way the cabinets could butt up against it and I could, achieve what I wanted. So these are just the very cheapest Home Depot bare wood MDF cabinets and off-the-shelf countertop. And then what I did to accommodate that plumbing is in these lower cabinets, I built them such that I could accommodate those. For instance, you see this split here in the countertop. The water meter is right there. So this countertop is separate from the rest, and there's a piano hinge back there. So if they ever have to get to the water meter, move all this out and open that, and they can get to it. And then these 2 drawers are faux. They don't open. And then down here, so this is part of the household. That's all my household paints and stuff like that. And then again, on this side, to accommodate that waste, I don't know if you can see, but there's an opening there. And let me see if you can see that way. Yeah, there's the waste pipe. So that's the clean out. So if I ever had to open that and route it out or what have you, I have access to do that. So I use the cabinets and countertops to basically create what I needed, which was a spray booth area, vented outside, accommodate the sink, and then have a build area, drawers and shelves and stuff. More storage above that I could put under cabinet lighting. Also, at some point during the 2010s, having learned the hard way, I went out and got this air filtration system to try to keep the dust down. I don't know why I have so much dust in this basement. What it does is sucks in air and filters it through this filter. What I do is just let it run. It actually has a remote. You can start it and then you can set it for different time settings. So I'll let it run like 2 to 4 hours before I do any painting. And I have track lighting on those 3 walls. And then the track lighting over my workspace gives me a couple of different angles of light. And then also up underneath, I put lighting. And then I also added, the final touch was the lamp, so that as I sit there, I have lighting from every different angle. From behind me, over my head, from above me, in front of me, and then the lamp itself. So, when you're checking surfaces, if they're smooth or whatever, you could hold it up to the light in any direction. As for the spray station, I did a specific video on this when I swapped out my spray booth. I'll put a link in the description. After I built this, very shortly after, the local True Value went out of business. So I actually got this almost fully stocked for about $100. So I brought it down here. Believe it or not, these testers paints last forever. As long as you can stir them and thin them, they'll last. But then this is my Model Master collection of paints, and what I did is just, separated them with cardboard. There's Alclad, Mod Podge, all that. So this is, everything for painting. Here's where I, mix the paints, thin them, test spray them on the spoons, and then, of course, the spray booth. It comes with these plastic card inserts so that you can use it as a photo booth with those lights. In my recent videos, that's exactly what I use it for. And it has a turntable, and I'll put the model on there and turn it. On this side in the cabinets, this is all dedicated to spraying. So here's some masking material, but then here's my old airbrushes. And then here's the newer one, and then extra needles and whatnot for the talent. Let's see. Oh, this is so sad. And as you can see, I love Model Master. I'm going to pop a quick little video I took maybe a week and a half ago now. So just a quick aside, the hobby aisle of my Ace Hardware, which is like basically my hobby shop, just switched over from Model Master to Tamiya and these MPP Mission Models paints. And they have just a few testers left. But yeah, end of an era. So yeah, no more Model Master. And then this is more, taping down parts, stuff like that. And then my gloves. And then these are things I made to hold airplanes. You stick those 3 points into the wheel wells, and then you can hold the plane while you paint it. So, just an idea. So that's the spray area. This is the build area. I keep most of the tools I use over here in the corner, and then down this set of drawers. You can see all the glues, the Panaline wash, various super glues, and then the brushes to apply those super glues, zip kicker there in the back, the micro scale, the salva set, all the stuff on here, canopy glue, pens, various markers and pencils, and then the brushes I use the most. And then down the side here, this blue box used to be my spares box for all the stuff, but it was such a hodgepodge that I sorted it out into and labeled these containers. So this is kind of my spares box drawer. This is all the tools to build. My last video, I showed that Jared had sent me these, so I gotta sort through, get rid of a lot of these, and this is gonna replace those. All the various tools I use to construct. Here's my PE bender, you name it, it's in there. There's where I keep all my tape, all my clamps of various sizes, more sticky tack, which I absolutely love, my set of files, and then like build stash. So this is all the commercial building parts that I would use, my fishing line, weights for the noses of aircraft, chalk, Lego blocks, indispensable for building little supports or whatever. And then my first cutting mat, tape, sandpaper, and then the last tool here is my Dremel tool. It's actually a Black & Decker. And then up here in the cabinet, I have all the parts that go with it. That's pretty much my building area. For references, so this is my old computer. It's not hooked up to the internet. I've pretty much gone all Apple now because everything hooks together, your phone, your laptop, the whole 9 yards. And then I'll bring stuff from up there in my office down here on a zip drive. And so I use that for references. But I also use this wall, as you've seen in all my videos. And what I have up here, these things stick to the wall, right? They're gooey on one side. And then you stick your references, if I could do this one-handed, up onto there, and it holds your references. And so I'll put a lot of ones that I'm going to refer to really often, I'll put up there. And then one last thing that probably bears mentioning is glasses. So these are cheaters. I think I got them from Jewel. I got just the strongest ones I could find. And then I actually ordered these lenses from Micromark. I just clamped them and then glued them to the frame of a pair of safety glasses. And so now I just, put these on. And the older we get, the more you're gonna need these, trust me. Next, I wanna address photography. So this is my Old Faithful, I guess I'll call it. It's a Canon Sure Shot. It is both a video recorder, although in SD, SLR-like quality camera, digital camera. What I love about it is it has all these settings, and you can get super macro, and you can literally get things right up to the lens and get super detail. In my earliest videos, I only took pictures, strung all those pictures together, and then talked over it. Now I use it just for close-ups that I'll, cut into the video. Speaking of video, I got these very simple tripods on Amazon. They were maybe 12 bucks a piece. And what's nice about them is you can bend them and shape them and put them anywhere you want. Basically what you do is just stretch it. It's gonna be a little difficult with one hand, but stretch it, get it in there, and then it holds it. So I just have this one on the cabinets, and that's how I get my overhead shots, is with that. These things are super versatile, and you could get really creative with them. I just kind of played with it until I found a way I could get it to look down on the top. But you could use an old lamp. You could use your existing lamp. Wrap this around there somehow so that you could get it to point down at what you were illuminating. If I need to take any shots, from the side or anything like that, I have this tripod. And what's nice is you can take this part off of here, and now it can go on to the tripod and hold your camera on there. Yeah, you've seen this angle, so that's how I achieve that. And I even use this tripod to videotape footage off of my iMac. I just turn off all the lights, try to minimize the reflection back, and then do that. Kind of the last step for photography is making the YouTube video. What I do is just make a folder, put all my videos and pictures and stills or whatever in there, and then cut and paste those into iMovie, just the basic app, and then I just use the tools in there to edit it, do voiceovers or whatever, and then you can export it in YouTube uploadable format back to your folder and then proceed from there. In iMovie, I just went and got you know, not the cheapest, but not the most expensive aftermarket microphone. And I use that for the voiceovers. And that's pretty much it for camera and photography. Talk about storage. Most of it under here is stash. Same thing here. Stash kits and some box art, and then some building materials. Then in here, it's just, you know, various and sundry junk. Same thing down here, just bags and, you know. I will come back to that in a minute. So then the upper is, again, stash. All I do is yank that down a little bit, and I can open that. So stash, mainly along the top up there, and then down here are all my fine scale modelers, going all the way to, what is that, 2020, and I think there's 2021. So here I'm going to kind of pick back up with the history. After I built this room, the same publishing company, I went out and I bought these books. And you can see how worn that one is. This is, you know, painting and finishing scale models, everything you could possibly want to know, including suggestions on airbrushes, compressors, and then every technique, you know, that you would need to do a really decent model. I also then got this. I grew up going to air shows and stuff, so that just grabbed my attention. The last exhibit in this, he calls them storylines. I called them theme builds, but he did this, you know, the set of Blue Angels. I learned that technique from this book, and a matter of fact, there's that plane. Actually, these World War II 1 to 72s were among the first I applied my skills to, newfound skills. And then I broke up the Blue Angels into these two, all the jets, and then the F-18 last. And so that was the start of post learning how to do it properly. Then did these Tuskegee Airmen. Before I got to the Thunderbirds, I wanted a better surface than bare metal foil could give me. So I did these Tuskegee Airmen, and again, my first foray into Alclad, and then did those. And then the rest is kind of history. I started out with shelves, and then just out of happenstance, lucked into this. A shop that I frequent was upgrading, and they had a garage sale. And yeah, just lucked into that, right? So over time, because you're building models, your display is inevitably going to have to evolve. So for example, so I just entered that contest. And if you recall, the Tuskegee Airmen used to be down there on one of these mirrors, similar to these other bottom ones. For the show, I built them their own display base, and I intend to keep this way. Now, the Hornet is going to go back, you know, down here next to the B-25. But now I have this space with the mirror left. So my next build is going to be for the Charlie Mac 12741 build. And I'm going to build the Lady Lindy, which was Amelia Earhart's, the plane she crossed the first woman to cross the Atlantic and set many cross-continental speed records with. So that's going to be my next build. It's going to go with the Spirit of St. Louis, which I have, which is right down there. So they're going to get their own mirror, and I'll, you know, do some more shuffling around of the remaining planes. And that's one of the reasons I go 1 to 72 and 1 to 144 is to conserve space. And the last couple of things I've added, you may have noticed, is this desk. My oldest used it her freshman year at college, didn't want it anymore. So now that houses the rest of the stash to complete the Enterprise project. Someone had a question out there of what do you have in the background while you're modeling? This shows the age of the TV. It still has a VCR built into it. But I'll, you know, sometimes have, if there's a sporting event, you know, one of the 4 Chicago teams playing in the background. Other than that, I have, that's a Bluetooth speaker, and I'll play music over my phone, or a audio book over my phone. So I've been in this house almost 23 years, and in that time, I've built everything you see here. But here's a true demonstration of just how far my skills have come. They still have an extremely long way to go, but I think you might find this funny. Here's the A6 intruder. Those seams are horrible, and those doors are actually upside down and on the wrong sides, as opposed to this A6 intruder. Here's a F18 I did, back then. F15 I did back then. I think, these are scraps now. I think the engines from that are now in one of those Vigilantes. But this, you might get a kick out of. This is an E2C Hawkeye that I did back then, and this is the E2A that I did recently. So there's the seams. You can see all of the decals silvering, unlike the ones on there. But here's the piece de resistance. What do you see wrong there? Yep, those are on, again, upside down and backwards. I don't know what the heck I was smoking back then, but it must have been good. But this actually had some practical value. Remember, I displayed these hanging up, so I didn't have any weight in the nose. So what I would do is then stand it up and then put sticky tack on the nose with weights until I got to how many weights it would take for it to stand up. Then put those weights in that nose and then some, so that I would be sure it would stand. Even from the archives, it has some use, and you can see I test paint on it and stuff like that. So yeah, I think I got a little better. And now I'm finally building cars, the first since my childhood, and I'm going to be doing some armor. Yeah, that's my story. As long and twisting as it was. Thanks for hanging in there if you're still there. I know it's kind of meandering, but I hope you enjoyed that, or at least found it interesting and maybe saw a couple of things you'd like to emulate in your workspace. So feel free to let me know what you think in the comments, and please post a story of your own if you haven't already. It's kind of fun doing these. So as always, thanks for watching, and happy modeling.